1.2 1.
Should we buy her a present?
How long have you been waiting?
How many children does your sister have?
2.
Why didn't you like the movie?
Isn't this a beautiful place?
3.
What are they talking about?
Who does this bag belong to?
4.
Who lives in that house?
How many people follow you on Twitter?
1.3
Could you tell me what time the store next door opens?
Do you know if Mark's coming to the meeting? Do you know whether Mark's coming to the meeting?
1.4 1.
Do you have a big family? Do you have a big family?
2.
What don't you like about the place where you live? What don't you like about the place where you live?
3.
What sports or games are you good at? What sports or games are you good at?
4.
Do you think you have a healthy diet? Do you think you have a healthy diet?
5.
What makes you feel happy? What makes you feel happy?
1.5 1.
Do you have a big family?
2.
What don't you like about the place where you live?
3.
What sports or games are you good at?
4.
Do you think you have a healthy diet?
5.
What makes you feel happy?
1.6 1.
Do you have a big family?
Yes, actually, I'm one of 7. I have 5 sisters and a brother.
Wow, that's a huge family.
2.
What don't you like about the place where you live?
Well, for one thing, I don't like my neighbors very much.
Why not? What's wrong with them?
3.
What sports or games are you good at?
Well, I'm not really very athletic, but I'm very good at chess.
Me too. We could play a game one day.
4.
Do you think you have a healthy diet?
Yes, very. In fact, I'm a vegan, so I only eat fruit and vegetables, and grains, and no meat or fish.
How interesting. How long have you been a vegan?
5.
What makes you feel happy?
Lots of things. Like buying new shoes.
Oh, really? I can't think of anything worse.
1.7 1.
Wow, that's a huge family.
2.
Why not? What's wrong with them?
3.
Me too. We could play a game one day.
4.
How interesting. How long have you been a vegan?
5.
Oh, really? I can't think of anything worse.
1.8 1.
Demanding.
2.
Flustered.
3.
Bizarre.
4.
Think on your feet.
5.
Approach.
6.
Rather than.
7.
Crush.
8.
Recruitment agency.
9.
Job seekers.
10.
Flapping.
1.9. 1.
I was being interviewed for a job with an advertising agency, and the interviewer kept checking information on my resume and then asking me about it. And he saw that I studied philosophy in college, and he said, "Oh, I see that you studied philosophy in college. Do you still practice philosophy?" So I said, "Well, I still think a lot." Anyway, he obviously liked the answer because I got the job.
2.
At my job interview to become an editor with a publishing company, there were 3 people asking questions, 2 managers and a woman from human resources. All the questions had been pretty normal. They were about my studies and experience, and then suddenly the woman from human resources asked me, "What would make you kick a dog?" I was totally flustered, but I managed to answer. I said, "I'd only kick it if the dog had bad grammar and couldn't punctuate properly." I thought it was a clever answer, and in fact, I got the job.
3.
When I was applying for a teaching job in Korea, they were doing the interviews by phone because I was in the US. And because of the time difference, they were all very early in the morning, which is not my best time. Anyway, the director of studies of this particular school asked me, "How tall are you? And how much do you weigh?" I answered his questions, but after the interview, when I thought about it, I decided that I didn't want to work in a school that would judge me by my height or my weight. So later, when they offered me the job, I turned it down.
4.
I was being interviewed for a job, and the interviewer asked me, "What animal would you like to be reincarnated as?" So I said a cat, because it was the first thing I thought of, and because cats have a good life. Well, at least in the US they do. And then the interviewer immediately looked a little embarrassed and said that he had been told to ask me that question to see how I would react, but that he thought it was a stupid question. In the end, I didn't get the job, so maybe the interviewer wasn't very fond of cats.
5.
I went for a job interview at a lawyer's office. There were 2 of us waiting to be interviewed, me and a man about the same age as me. He was nice, so we were chatting before we went in, and we agreed to have a coffee afterward. Well, I went in first, and they asked me the usual kinds of questions about my previous job. They had all my personal information on my resume, and so they knew I was married, and suddenly they asked me, "Are you planning to have children?" I said, "Not in the immediate future, but maybe one day." Afterward, when I was having coffee with the other candidate, I asked him if he'd been asked the same question, and he said no, even though he was married too. In fact, we both got offered jobs, but I still think that it was a very sexist question to ask.
1.10.
Fatos began to look very carefully at the coffee grounds in Chris's cup and to tell him what she could see. I remember that the first thing she said was that she could see sacks of money. And this was very accurate because Chris had worked in Saudi Arabia for several years and had earned a lot of money there. She also said that she could see a blonde lady. Well, Carla, Chris's girlfriend at the time, was blonde, so that was spot on too. But then Fatos suddenly looked very serious, and she said, "I can see somebody in your family who is sick, very sick, at this moment." I remember thinking, oh no, don't ruin a nice evening. But Chris is a very laid-back kind of person, and he didn't seem to be too worried by what she'd said. He just said, "Well, as far as I know, the people in my family are okay." Chris is an only child, and his mother lived with her sister. They were both in their 70s. Fatos said 1 or 2 more things, and then we asked the waiter for the check and said our goodbyes. It was a slightly weird end to what had been a very enjoyable evening. I can remember feeling relieved that I had said no when Fatos asked me if she could read my coffee cup. Chris and I got a taxi back to our hotel. The next day, Chris had a free morning because it was my turn to do the teacher training session in the hotel. So he went out early to go sightseeing in Istanbul. Around 9 o'clock, I got a call on my cell phone. It was Chris's girlfriend, Carla, calling. She told me that she needed to talk to Chris immediately, but that he wasn't answering his cell phone. I could tell by her voice that she had some very bad news for him, and I immediately thought of what Fatos had said the night before, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I asked Carla what had happened, and she told me that Chris's aunt had died suddenly in the night. So, was it just a spooky coincidence? Or did Fatos really see what she said she saw in the coffee cup? I spoke to her before I left Istanbul, and I told her that Chris's aunt had died the night we had dinner. She wasn't at all surprised, and she just said, "Yes, I saw in the cup that someone in his family was near death, but I didn't want to frighten him, so I just said that the person was very sick." All I can say is that I always used to be very skeptical about fortune-telling, but now, well, I'm not so sure.
1.11. 1,
Well, Carla, Chris's girlfriend at the time, was blonde, so that was spot on too.
2,
But Chris is a very laid-back kind of person, and he didn't seem to be too worried by what she'd said.
3,
It was a slightly weird end to what had been a very enjoyable evening.
4,
So, was it just a spooky coincidence?
5,
I always used to be very skeptical about fortune-telling.
1.12. 1,
I heard a noise in the middle of the night.
You did? What kind of noise?
2,
You don't believe in ghosts, do you?
No, I don't.
3,
I don't believe you really saw a UFO.
I did see one. It couldn't have been anything else.
4,
I've never been to a fortune teller.
Neither have I.
I have. It was really interesting.
1.13. 1,
I like cats, but my husband doesn't.
Sally's coming tonight, but Angela isn't.
2,
I loved his latest novel.
So did I.
I haven't finished yet.
Neither have I.
Andrew's a doctor, and so is his wife. 3,
I don't like shopping online.
I do. I buy a lot of my clothes online.
4,
I went to a psychic yesterday.
You did?
I'll make the dinner.
You will? That's great.
5,
You didn't lock the door?
I did lock it. I know I did.
Sylvia isn't coming.
She is coming. I just spoke to her.
6,
You won't forget, will you?
She can speak Italian, can't she?
1.14.
I dreamed that I saw a ghost last night.
You did? So did I. How spooky.
I don't believe in fortune telling.
You don't? I do.
1.15.
You don't like horror movies, do you?
I do like them. It's just that sometimes they're too scary.
1.17. What's in your signature?
Our signature is very much part of the way in which we present ourselves to the world, so it can definitely give us some clues about the kind of person we are and how we feel about ourselves. As you know, a person's signature usually consists of a first name and a last name, or an initial and a last name. Your first name represents your private self, how you are with your family, and your last name represents your public self, the way you are at work or school and in your social life. If you use only initials, either for your first name or your last name in your signature, this means that you are more secretive and protective about either your private or public self. Now, look at the space between your name and last name. Are the two names very close together, or is there a reasonable space between them? The more space there is between your name and your last name, the more you wish to keep these two parts of your personality separate.
1.18. The size of your signature.
Now let's look at the size of your signature. If your first name is bigger and more prominent in your signature, this usually means that your private self is more important to you than your public self. If your last name is bigger and more prominent, this probably means that your public self is more important to you. If your whole signature is very big compared with the rest of your writing, this usually means that you are a self-confident person. Some people actually sign in capital letters, which suggests that they may be big-headed or even arrogant, rather than just self-confident. On the other hand, people who sign their name with a very small signature tend to be insecure and have low self-esteem.
1.19. The legibility of your signature.
Another important factor is how legible your signature is. In other words, how easy it is to read. A legible signature tends to mean that you're a person with clear ideas and objectives. On the other hand, if your signature is difficult to read, this may imply that you're somebody who doesn't think very clearly, and that you may be disorganized or indecisive. It can also mean that you're secretive. Generally speaking, the more illegible your signature is, the less assertive you probably are as a person.
1.20. The angle of your signature.
Finally, I want to say something about the angle of your signature. That's to say, whether your signature is horizontal or goes up or goes down on the page. A rising signature, one that goes up, means that you are the kind of person who, when you're faced with problems, will work hard to overcome them. You're a determined person and probably optimistic and ambitious. A descending signature, that is, one that goes down, suggests that you're the kind of person who gets disheartened or depressed when you're faced with problems, maybe because you are not very self-confident. A horizontal signature, one that goes straight across the page, usually indicates a person who is well-balanced and emotionally stable, and someone who is generally satisfied with the way their life is going. But it's worth bearing in mind that the angle of our signature may change at different times of our lives, depending on how we're feeling.
1.21. 1.
Some people actually sign in capital letters, which suggests that they may be big-headed or even arrogant.
2.
A descending signature suggests that you are the kind of person who gets disheartened or depressed when you are faced with problems, maybe because you are not very self-confident.
3.
A horizontal signature usually indicates a person who is well-balanced and emotionally stable.
1.22.
Bad-tempered.
Good-tempered.
Open-minded.
Narrow-minded.
Absent-minded.
Easygoing.
Laid back.
Tight-fisted.
Two-faced.
Strong-willed.
Self-centered.
1.23 Part 1 Preparing for a Job Interview.
My name is Jeff Neal. I'm a career coach, and I help people discover the right career for them and then actually go get that job.
How important is the resume when you're applying for a job?
The resume is really important because it represents you. It's often the first presentation of your skills and abilities to an employer before they actually have a chance to talk with you.
What are some mistakes that people make with their resumes?
So some of the biggest mistakes that I've seen that people make on their resume is they include everything, right? As an employer, I don't care what you did 20 years ago or 30 years ago. You may have been a star at something that you did 25 years ago, but as an employer, I'm thinking, this has no relevancy to me. You've changed over 25 years, the world has changed over 25 years. So people include far too much information in their resumes. My recommendation is that they only go back about 15 years.
Are there any other mistakes?
Another completely unforgivable mistake is grammatical errors, bad punctuation, and spelling errors. When I see a resume that has, more than one error, it's done, right? We live in a world where resumes are expected to be perfect. So word processing has spell check on it. There's just no reason to have something misspelled.
How important is a candidate's social media presence?
Yeah, in today's world, almost all hiring managers and HR staff will look for you online before they interview you. So your online profile can actually either help you get an interview or it can stop you from getting an interview. So for your social media, you want to be really careful, particularly when you're looking for a job. You want to be really careful about what pictures you're showing and what conversations you're posting is public information. You also want to do a Google search on your own name.
Assuming a candidate gets an interview, how do you help them to prepare for it?
So the way I help candidates prepare for interviews is I have them take the job advertisement, right? They can get the job advertisement if it's posted online or a job description from the HR office, and to go through it and simply circle what are the skills and abilities that are required to do that kind of job. And to take an 8.5 sheet of paper and make 3 columns, and in the first column list the key skills and abilities that are required to do that position. And then in the second column, list where they've used those skills and abilities in different roles in their career. And then in the third column, to actually create stories that demonstrate how they've used those skills in those different companies.
1.24 Part 2 On the Day of the Interview.
What tips can you give a candidate for the day itself? For example, how should people dress for an interview?
It's important to dress appropriately for an interview because if you're underdressed for an interview, it shows a lack of respect, right? Companies and employers are going to look at that and say, this person's not taking this interview seriously. So I encourage my clients to actually overdress a little bit for an interview. Now, how can you determine the best way to dress for an interview? You might actually get on a company's LinkedIn page and look at their LinkedIn photos because that'll give you a sense of that company's style. Are they all dressed in suits and they're really formal? Are they more relaxed? Another way outside of a big city is that you can often stake out the front door, a couple days ahead of time and see how employees are actually going into that office. How are they dressed?
Obviously, you shouldn't be late, but how early should you get there?
So you want to show up at an interview about 5 minutes early. If you get there earlier than that, just grab a cup of coffee in a nearby restaurant or shop. And that when you walk into the interview, you don't want to have your headphones on. You want to make sure your cell phone is turned off. You don't want to have any interruptions.
Do you have any other tips before the interview starts?
As soon as you walk into the building for a job interview, you've already begun the interview. The way that you greet people, the way that you greet the receptionist at the front desk and security, if there is security, all those people are part of the interview process because if you don't handle it in the right way, they may tell the person that you're interviewing with how you approach them and your chances of getting the job can actually be eliminated. So it's important that you treat everyone that you meet in the building as part of the interview process.
1.25 Part 3 During the interview itself.
Is it okay for a candidate to talk about money or salary during an interview?
It is okay for a candidate to talk about money and salary during an interview, but the real question is, when should they talk about money and salary? And the answer is late. One of the biggest mistakes that job candidates make is they focus too much on their own needs, right? So work-life balance is important, the number of hours I'm gonna work, the amount of vacation I'm gonna get, the pay and the benefits, they're all very important. But we have to understand that the employer is giving us money. What's most important is I want to communicate that I can deliver enough value for this position that you offer me the job. Once an employer believes that I'm the right candidate and then they offer me the position, that's the right time to start talking about money and benefits. However, I wouldn't raise the topic. I would let the employer raise it first.
Do you have any other tips for candidates during the interview?
Body image and body language is really, really important in an interview. I can remember interviewing someone that were slouched back and they were down and their energy was really, really low. And just communicated to me, this person doesn't really want this job. They didn't feel motivated. And I can remember talking with candidates who they're leaning forward and their voice is stronger. They're making a lot of eye contact directly with me. I can tell that they're really listening to what I'm saying. They're hearing what I'm saying, and that they want to learn about this job to help me understand their value. So body language and eye contact are really, really important. The tone of voice is also really, really important, because when we're unsure, we're less confident, we tend to not only slouch, but our voice goes down. And that's not communicating the confidence that you have, that you're confident in your skills and abilities.
And just to finish, did you ever ask extreme questions during interviews when you worked in HR?
As a director of HR, sometimes I would ask extreme questions, such as, if you could be any kind of tree in the world, what kind of tree would you want to be? Because I want to see what it reveals about someone's personality.
What would a good answer be?
So one good answer could be, I'd like to be an oak tree, because it's strong and it's steady. Another good answer could be, I'd like to be an apple tree, because it's beautiful when it's blooming and it gives fruit to people that they would enjoy. Another answer could be, I'd like to be a cactus, because cactuses don't need a lot of support and they're very, very persistent. They can survive.
1.26. Interview with a career counselor. Looking at language. 1.
So some of the biggest mistakes that I've seen that people make on their resume is they include everything.
2.
As an employer, I don't care what you did 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
3.
You also want to do a Google search on your own name.
4.
Take an 8.5 sheet of paper and make 3 columns.
5.
You want to make sure your cell phone is turned off.
6.
They're making a lot of eye contact directly with me.
1.27. On the street. Janine.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
The last time I had an interview for a job was in 2011.
How did you prepare for the interview?
I took a lot of rescue remedy to help with the nerves, and I just practiced every question that they could ask me in my head.
Did the interview go well?
No, it didn't. I didn't get the job.
Joe.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
About 2 months ago.
How did you prepare for the interview?
Well, I looked at the job description and thought about my experience and then tried to match my experience to the various different points on the job interview.
Did the interview go well?
It did.
How do you know it went well?
Because they offered me the job.
Ivan.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
I last had an interview for a job a few weeks ago. That's the last time I had an interview for a job.
How did you prepare for the interview?
To prepare for the job interview, I read about the company and learned about what they did and to see if I liked the work that they did.
How do you know it went well?
I think it went well because they followed up with an email to talk about further opportunities at that company.
Yasuko.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
The last interview that I had was for my current company that I work for, and that was about 2 years ago.
How did you prepare for the interview?
I prepared for the interview by doing a little research on the company, the kind of products that they make, their philosophy, the history and their background of the company.
Did the interview go well?
I think that the interview went well because it was actually a long interview. I had a lot of good conversation with the managers there, and I also got a few more interviews afterwards and eventually got the job, so the interviews went well.
Used.
When did you last have an interview for a job?
About 3 months ago.
How did you prepare for the interview?
I read about the company and I knew what the job contents was, and I knew everything that I had to know for the interview and was well prepared to answer their questions.
Did the interview go well?
It went well. In the end, they said I was too young, so they didn't hire me, but they would have if I was older, they said.
1.28 Colloquial English phrases. 1.
I just practiced every question that they could ask me in my head.
2.
And then tried to match my experience to the various different points on the job interview.
3.
I think it went well because they followed up with an email.
4.
Their philosophy, the history and their background of the company.
5.
In the end, they said I was too young, so they didn't hire me.
1.29 Minor illnesses and conditions. A. 9. A cough. 6.
A headache.
1. A rash. 4.
A temperature.
2. Sunburn. 8.
She's sick. She's vomiting.
10. She's sneezing. 3.
Her ankle is swollen.
7. Her back hurts. Her back aches. 5.
Her finger is bleeding.
1.30 C. 1. B.
He has a sore throat. It hurts when he talks or swallows food.
2. D.
He has diarrhea. He's been to the bathroom 5 times this morning.
3. E.
He feels sick. He feels like he's going to vomit.
4. C.
He's fainted. It's so hot in the room that he's lost consciousness.
5. H.
He has a blister on his foot. He's been walking in uncomfortable shoes.
6. F.
He has a cold. He's sneezing a lot and he has a cough.
7. A.
He has the flu. He has a temperature and he aches all over.
8. G.
He feels dizzy. He feels that everything is spinning around.
9. I.
He's cut himself. He's bleeding.
1.30 1.31. Injuries and more serious conditions. 1. C.
He's unconscious. He's breathing, but his eyes are closed and he can't hear or feel anything.
2. G.
He's had an allergic reaction. He was stung by a wasp, and now he has a rash and has difficulty breathing.
3. B.
He's twisted his ankle. He's sprained his ankle. He fell badly and now it's swollen.
4. D.
He has high blood pressure. It's 180/140.
5. E.
He has food poisoning. He ate some chicken that wasn't fully cooked.
6. F.
He's choking. He was eating a steak and a piece got stuck in his throat.
7. A.
He burned himself. He spilled some boiling water on himself.
1.32. Phrasal verbs connected with illness. 1.
Pass out means faint.
2.
Lie down means put your body in a horizontal position.
3.
Throw up means vomit, be sick.
4.
Get over means get better, recover from something.
5.
Come around means become conscious again.
1.33.
Shower. Sh. Pressure. Rash. Unconscious.
Jazz. J. Allergy. Bandage.
Chess. Ch. Choking. Temperature.
Key. K. Ache. Ankle. Stomach.
1.34.
Antibiotics.
Symptom.
Medicine.
Emergency.
Operation.
Aspirin.
Specialist.
Acetaminophen.
X-ray.
Cholesterol.
Injection.
CAT scan.
1.35.
Good morning, Mr. Blaine. What's the problem?
I haven't been feeling well for a few days. I keep getting headaches, and I've been coughing a lot too. And I have a temperature.
Have you been taking anything for the headaches?
Yes, acetaminophen. But it doesn't really help. I read on the internet that headaches can be the first symptom of a brain tumor.
How many tablets have you taken so far today?
I took 2 this morning.
And have you taken your temperature this morning?
Yes, I've taken it 5 or 6 times. It's high.
Let me see. Well, your temperature seems to be perfectly normal now.
I think I need a blood test. I haven't had one for 2 months.
Well, Mr. Blaine, I think we should wait for a few days and see how your symptoms develop. Can you send the next patient in, please, nurse?
1.36.
Your next patient is Mrs. Williams. Here are her notes.
How many times has Mr. Blaine been to the health center this week?
4 times, I think. Yes, I know. He's a complete...
1.37. 1.
Have you ever written a blog?
2.
We've landed, but we haven't gotten off the plane yet. I've already told you 3 times.
3. It's the best book I've ever read. 4.
I've known Keiko since I was a child. My sister has had the flu for 10 days now.
5. How many Patricia Cornwell novels have you read? They've seen each other twice this week.
1.38. 1.
How long have you been feeling sick?
He's been chatting online all evening.
2.
I haven't been sleeping well.
It's been raining all day.
3.
I've been shopping all morning. I'm exhausted.
Take your shoes off. They're filthy.
Yes, I know. I've been working in the yard.
1.39. 1.
I've been learning French for the last 3 years.
He's liked classical music since he was a teenager.
2.
She's been having a good time at school.
They've had that car for at least 10 years.
3.
We've lived in this town since 1980.
We've been living in a rented house for the last 2 months.
4.
I've painted the kitchen.
I've been painting the kitchen.
1.40. 1.
Life-threatening.
2.
Mouth ulcer.
3. Alternative remedies.
4.
Under the weather.
5.
Cancer.
6.
Infection.
7. Heart rate.
8.
Surgery.
9. Pulse.
10.
Tumor.
11. Miracle cures.
1.41.
So, Dr. Roberta, do you meet a lot of hypochondriacs in your work?
All the time, I'm afraid. It's very common these days for people to look up their symptoms on health websites on the internet and to diagnose themselves with weird or exotic illnesses. For example, the other day, I had a patient who came in because his back was very red and itchy. He had been looking on internet medical sites and was absolutely convinced that he had an extremely rare skin condition. He even knew the medical name, nodular paniculitis. But in fact, when I examined him and talked to him, it turned out that he had spent the weekend working in his yard in the sun, and his back was sunburned.
So, you would prefer your patients not to check their symptoms on the internet?
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-health websites. I just want people to use them sensibly. The problem is that diagnosis of a condition or an illness doesn't just depend on one specific symptom that you can type into Google. It depends on all kinds of other things, like a patient's appearance, their blood pressure, their heart rate, and so on.
Of course.
And diagnosis also depends on where you live. For example, if you live in a U.S. city and you haven't traveled overseas, it's very unlikely that you have malaria, even if you have some of the symptoms.
What other problems are there when people use health websites?
Well, you have to check carefully what kind of site it is that you are looking at. Some websites look as if they have been created by health professionals, but in fact, they've been set up by commercial companies that are trying to sell you something. Also, some healthcare sites recommend expensive treatments or medicine that is not available in all parts of the world.
Are there any websites that you would recommend?
Oh yes, absolutely. For example, people with chronic diseases like asthma can get a lot of help and information from online support groups. These websites have forums where you can talk to other people who have the same condition and illness, and you can usually get information about the latest research and new treatments.
Mm-hmm.
And there are often online support groups for people who have unusual illnesses too.
Finally, do you have any tips for all those cyberchondriacs out there?
Yes, I have 3. First, only look online after you've been to the doctor. If you're not feeling well, make a list of the symptoms you have that are worrying you, and go and see your doctor with this list. Then, when your doctor has told you what he or she thinks, you could take a look online.
Uh-huh.
Second, make sure you're looking at a reliable and professional medical website. And finally, remember that common symptoms usually have common causes. So if you have diarrhea, for example, it's much more likely to be food poisoning than the Ebola virus.
Dr. Roberta, thank you very much.
1.43. 1.
The English are famous for drinking tea.
The Chinese invented paper.
The Dutch make wonderful cheese.
2.
The poor are getting poorer, and the rich are getting richer.
The government needs to create more jobs for the unemployed.
1.44.
We have a charming old house near the lake.
She has long brown hair.
I bought a beautiful Italian leather belt.
1.45.
Welcome to today's program in our series on age. The topic is clothes, and the question is, do people these days dress their age, and should they? Our guests are both fashion journalists with well-known magazines. Hello, Liza and Adrian.
Hello.
Hi.
Let's start with you, Liza.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say to all the young people out there is next time you give your grandma a warm cardigan and some slippers for her birthday, don't be surprised if she asks for the receipt, because she'll probably want to go out and exchange them for something more exciting.
So you think these days women in their 60s and 70s dress much younger than they used to?
Oh, absolutely. Think of women like Sophia Loren, Catherine Deneuve, Helen Mirren, and Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda is in her late 70s, and last month she was on a talk show wearing a leather miniskirt. She looked fabulous. But of course, it isn't just famous women who are dressing younger. Some recent research says that 9 out of 10 women say they try to dress younger than their age.
Do you think that's true?
Well, it depends on your age, of course. A lot of teenage girls try to dress older than they are, maybe to get into parties. But I would say that from 30 onward, most women try to dress younger than they are.
And do you think there's anything wrong with that?
Actually, I think it's not a question of dressing older or younger. It's a question of wearing what suits you.
Uh-huh.
And if you looked good in jeans when you were 15, if you keep your figure, you'll probably look good in them when you're 80. There are a few things that can look a little ridiculous on older women. Like, let's see, very short shorts, but not many.
So your fashion rule would be?
Wear whatever you think suits you and makes you feel good.
Adrian, what about men? Do you think they also try to look younger than their age?
Well, interestingly, in the research Liza mentioned, only 12% of the men who were questioned said they had ever thought about dressing to look younger. But actually, I think a lot of them weren't telling the truth. Look at all those middle-aged men you see wearing jeans that are too tight and incredibly bright t-shirts.
You don't approve?
No, I don't. Personally, I think that men should take their age into account when they're buying clothes.
Do you think that some men actually dress older than their age?
Yes, definitely. Some do.
Uh-huh.
Some men in their 20s look as if they were 20 years older by wearing blazers and khakis, or wearing suits and ties when they don't have to. They've maybe started their careers and they want their bosses to take them more seriously.
Yeah.
And a lot of men in their 30s realize that they can't dress like a teenager anymore, but they go to the opposite extreme and they start buying the kind of clothes that their fathers wear.
So, what would your fashion rule be for men?
Dress for the age you are, not for the age you wish you were.
Liza and Adrian, thank you very much.
One 1.46. Describing clothes. A. Fit. 2.
Loose.
1.
Tight.
Style. 6.
Hooded.
4.
Long-sleeved.
3.
Sleeveless.
5.
V-neck.
Pattern. 9.
Patterned.
11.
Plaid.
7.
Plain.
10.
Dotted.
8.
Striped.
1.47. C. Materials. 4.
A cotton undershirt.
9.
A denim vest.
5.
A fur collar.
3.
A lace top.
1.
A linen suit.
7.
A lycra swimsuit.
8.
A silk scarf.
6.
A velvet bow tie.
2.
A wool cardigan.
11.
Leather sandals.
10.
Suede boots.
1.48. Adjectives to describe the way people dress. 1.
Long skirts are really fashionable now.
2.
She's very trendy. She always wears the latest fashions.
3.
The Italians have a reputation for being very stylish. They wear fashionable and attractive clothes.
4.
He looks really scruffy. His clothes are old and dirty.
5.
Jane looked very neat in her new suit. She wanted to make a good impression.
6.
That tie's a little old-fashioned. Is it your dad's?
1.49. Verb phrases. 1. See.
I'm going to dress up tonight.
2. A.
Please hang up your coat.
3. F.
These jeans don't fit me.
4. H.
That skirt really suits you.
5. G.
Your bag matches your shoes.
6. B.
I need to get changed.
7. E.
Hurry up and get undressed.
8. I.
Get up and get dressed.
9. D.
That tie doesn't really go with your shirt.
1.50.
Boot. Ooh. Suit. Loose.
Bull. O. Hooded. Wool.
Tree. E. sleeveless, jeans,
fish, linen, slippers,
egg, checked, leather,
cat, sandals, patterned,
clock, cotton, dotted,
saw, awful, long.
1.51. A short movie on the history of surgery.
Hi, I'm in Southwark, in London. This area used to be the site of one of London's oldest hospitals, St Thomas's. St Thomas's was here for almost 700 years and had one of the country's first ever operating theatres.
Have you ever had an operation? If you have, it was probably in an operating theatre like this. These modern theatres are clean, spacious, and bright. As you can see, they are full of high-tech equipment. And they are designed to make surgery as clean and as safe as possible. They usually have an adjustable metal operating table in the center of the room. Above the table, there are several large fluorescent lights, which allow surgeons to see everything. At the head of the table, there's an anesthetic machine, and around the room there are various monitors, measuring heart rate, blood pressure, and blood oxygen levels.
But what about old operating theatres? What were they like? Well, that's why I've come here. You see, St Thomas's old operating theatre used to be in the attic of this church.
The hospital was moved from here in the 1860s. But when a historian decided to investigate the church's old attic, he found a large abandoned room containing some old-fashioned surgical equipment.
Today, this room is part of the Old Operating Theatre Museum. The museum has been teaching visitors about the history of surgery for over 50 years.
The first question many people ask when they come here is, why is it called an operating theatre? Well, the answer is simple. As you can see, medical students used to stand here and watch the surgery, like an audience watching a play in a theatre. During operations, the room was always cramped and crowded, and the bigger and bloodier the operation, the bigger the audience.
Imagine how frightening it must have been for the poor patients. And they were usually quite poor. The rich had their operations at home, but the poor would tolerate the audience in order to receive surgery they would never be able to afford otherwise.
The patient would lie on this uncomfortable wooden bench while the surgeon worked. There was no anesthetic, so patients were awake throughout the procedure, unless, of course, they fainted. The surgeons were quick. They could amputate a leg in less than a minute, but they had very little understanding of hygiene.
There were no antiseptics, and surgeons always wore the same coats, which were usually covered with blood from previous operations.
They often used dirty instruments, which were kept on this old wooden table, and they rarely washed their hands. Below the operating table, there was a wooden box filled with sawdust or wood shavings. This collected the blood from each operation. But often, there was too much blood, so in the end, they built a false floor. The blood could be washed away and collected in the space between the new floor and the original floor. In such unhygienic conditions, it isn't surprising that patients often died during surgery. After the patient's death, their bones and organs were kept for further study.
All of these practices seem primitive to us today, but without these techniques, we might never have developed the cleaner, safer procedures we have today. That's something we can all be grateful for.
Two point two. 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board this flight to Hong Kong. Please place all carry-on luggage in the overhead compartments or underneath the seat in front of you. We ask that you please fasten your seatbelts and, for safety reasons, we advise you to keep them fastened throughout the flight.
2.
We also ask that you make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in their full upright and locked positions for takeoff. Please turn off all personal electronic devices, including laptops and cell phones. We remind you that smoking is prohibited for the duration of the flight.
3.
Ladies and gentlemen, we ask for your attention for the following safety instructions. Please read the safety information card located in the seat pocket in front of you. There are 6 emergency exits on this aircraft, all marked with exit signs. Take a minute to locate the exit closest to you. Note that the nearest exit may be behind you.
4.
The safety information card is in the seat pocket in front of you. Please read it. It shows you the equipment carried on this aircraft for your safety. Your life jacket is located under your seat. In the unlikely event of a water landing, place the life jacket over your head, fasten the straps at the front, and pull them tight. Do not inflate the jacket inside the aircraft. As you leave the aircraft, pull down on the red tabs to inflate the vest. If necessary, the life jacket can be inflated by blowing through these tubes.
2.3. At the airport. 1. A.
Airport terminal.
2. D.
Baggage drop-off.
3. I.
Baggage claim.
4. C.
Check-in desk.
5. J.
Customs.
6. B.
Departures board.
7. G.
Gate.
8. H.
Runway.
9. E.
Security.
10. F.
VIP lounge.
2.4. On board.
I often fly to Chile on business. I always choose an aisle seat so that I can get up and walk around more easily. Sometimes there is turbulence when the plane flies over the Andes, which I don't enjoy, and the cabin crew tells the passengers to put their seatbelts on. There aren't many direct flights to Chile from Paris, so I usually have to get a connecting flight in Atlanta. Whenever I take long-haul flights, I always suffer from jet lag because of the time difference, and I feel tired for several days.
2.5. Travel, trip, or journey. 1.
We're going on a 5-day trip to the mountains.
2.
How long was your journey across China?
It was about 2 months long, and it was amazing.
3.
Do you have to travel much for your job?
4.
Have a good trip. See you when you get back.
2.6. Phrasal verbs related to air travel. 1.
My husband dropped me off at the airport 2 hours before the flight.
2.
I checked in online the day before I was going to fly.
3.
As soon as I got on the plane, I sat down in the first empty seat.
4.
The plane took off late because of the bad weather.
5.
I filled out the immigration form for the U.S., which the cabin crew gave me shortly before landing.
6.
When I got off the plane, I felt exhausted after the long flight.
7.
When I picked up my luggage at baggage claim, I bumped into an old friend who had been on the same flight.
2.7.
With me in the studio today, I have Richard, who's a pilot, and Bryn, who's an air traffic controller. And they are going to answer some of the most frequently asked questions about flying and air travel. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, we're going to start with you, Richard. The first question is, what weather conditions are the most dangerous when flying a plane?
Probably the most dangerous weather conditions are when the wind changes direction very suddenly. This tends to happen during thunderstorms and hurricanes, and it's especially dangerous during takeoff and landing. But it's pretty unusual. I've been flying for 37 years now, and I've only experienced this 3 or 4 times.
What about turbulence? Is that dangerous?
It can be very bumpy and very uncomfortable, but it isn't dangerous. Even strong turbulence won't damage the plane. Pilots always try to avoid turbulence, but it can sometimes occur without any warning, which is why we always advise passengers to wear their seatbelt all the time during the flight.
Uh-huh. Which is more dangerous, takeoff or landing?
Both takeoff and landing can be dangerous. They're the most dangerous moments of a flight. Pilots talk about the critical 8 minutes, the 3 minutes after takeoff, and the 5 minutes before landing.
Mm-hmm.
Most accidents happen in this period. But I would say that takeoff is probably slightly more dangerous than landing. There is a critical moment just before takeoff when the plane is accelerating, but it hasn't yet reached the speed to be able to fly. If the pilot has a problem with the plane at this point, he or she has very little time, maybe only a second, to abort the takeoff.
Are some airports more dangerous than others?
Yes, some are. Particularly airports with high mountains around them, and airports in countries with older or more basic navigation equipment.
Uh-huh.
For some difficult airports, like, let's say Kathmandu, they only allow very experienced pilots to land there. And for some of these airports, pilots have to practice on a simulator first before they are given permission to land a plane there.
Thanks, Richard. Over to you, Bryn. What personal qualities do you think you need to be an air traffic controller?
I think confidence is number one. You need to be a self-confident person. You have to be sure of yourself and of the decisions you're making.
Most people imagine that being an air traffic controller is very stressful. Do you agree?
Actually, on a daily basis, the job isn't as stressful as people think. Obviously, it's true that stressful situations do arise, but when you're very busy, you just don't have time to get stressed.
Why is it important for pilots and controllers to have good, clear English?
English is the official language of air traffic control. We communicate with pilots using very specific phrases like runway, wind, cleared for takeoff, turbulence, traffic ahead, to your left, to your right, things like that. And it's true that you could just learn these specific phrases. But then in an emergency, you don't know what language you might need. It's much less predictable, which is why it's vital for pilots and air traffic controllers to speak really good, clear English.
If I could just interrupt here, in fact, there have been several air crashes that happened because the air traffic controller misunderstood something that the pilot had said in English, or vice versa, because their pronunciation wasn't clear enough.
Yes, that's right.
Finally, people tend to think that most pilots and air traffic controllers are men. Would you say that was true?
Not in air traffic control. There are lots of women. It may not be 50-50, but there are plenty of us.
It's true about pilots, though. I mean, there are some women pilots, but it's still pretty much a male-dominated job, I'd say.
Why do you think that is?
People say it's because men have a better sense of direction.
Very funny.
Richard, Bryn, thank you very much.
2.8. 1.
We arrived at the airport and checked in.
2.
We were having dinner when the plane hit some turbulence.
At 9 o'clock, most people on the plane were reading or were trying to sleep.
3.
When we arrived at the airport, we suddenly realized that we had left one of the suitcases in the taxi.
4.
We'd been flying for about 2 hours when suddenly the captain told us to fasten our seatbelts because we were flying into some very bad weather.
2.9.
Lena was crying because she'd been reading a very sad book.
Lena didn't want to see the movie because she'd already read the book.
2.10.
Boot. Ooh. Flew. Through.
Fish. Hid.
Saw. Ah. Caught. Fought. Thought.
Bird. Heard. Hurt.
Phone. Oh. Drove. Rode. Told. Wrote.
Up. Cut.
Egg. Fell. Held. Kept. Left. Read. Said. Slept.
Train. Became. Lay.
2.11.
We were on a flight to Lyon, and we'd been flying for about 5 hours. I was reading, and my wife was watching a movie, when suddenly we heard a very loud noise. It sounded as if an engine had exploded. The pilot didn't tell us what had happened until half an hour later.
2.13. 1.
He walks very slowly.
I speak 5 languages fluently.
The driver was seriously injured in the accident.
2.
I hardly ever have time for breakfast.
Liam's always late for work.
I would never have thought you were 40.
3.
My parents will be here in half an hour.
It rained all day yesterday.
4.
I'm nearly finished.
We're incredibly tired. My husband works a lot, but he doesn't earn much.
5.
Unfortunately, the package never arrived.
Ideally, we should leave here at 10.
2.14. 1.
Oh no!
2.
Oh, what happened to the music?
3.
Can I see your boarding pass?
Oh no, I lost it. Where is it? Where is it?
I'm afraid you can't fly if you don't have your boarding pass.
Oh, here it is. Thank goodness. It was in my pocket.
4.
Tom, this is Andrea. But, of course, you two know each other, don't you?
Actually, we've only met once, so not really. Hi, Andrea.
Hello.
5.
I can't see a thing. I think we'd better stop for a little bit.
6.
Excuse me. Please, could you tell me how to get to the train station?
Sure, dude. Right down Main Street, left at the light, straight through the underpass, and then it's right in front of you.
Pardon?
2.15 Confusing adverbs and adverbial phrases. 1.
He trains very hard, at least 3 hours a day.
It's incredibly foggy. I can hardly see anything.
2.
I hate it when people arrive late for meetings.
I haven't heard from Mike lately. He must be very busy.
3.
At the end of a movie, I always stay and watch the credits roll.
I didn't want to go, but in the end, they persuaded me.
4.
I love most kinds of music, but especially jazz.
My wedding dress was specially made for me by a dressmaker.
5.
She looks younger than me, but actually she's 2 years older.
Right now, they're renting a house, but they're hoping to buy one soon.
6.
I'm nearly finished with my book. I'm on the last chapter.
Excuse me, is there a bank near here?
7.
Have you found a job yet?
He's 35, but he still lives with his parents.
8.
Have you ever been to the U.S.?
I've been all over the U.S. I've even been to Alaska.
2.16 Comment adverbs. 1.
Ideally.
2.
In fact.
3.
Basically.
4.
Obviously.
5.
Gradually.
6.
Apparently.
7.
Anyway.
8.
Eventually.
2.17
Actually.
Almost.
Apparently.
Basically.
Definitely.
Even.
Eventually.
Fortunately.
Gradually.
Ideally.
Incredibly.
Luckily.
Obviously.
Unfortunately.
2.18 1.
There was a lot of traffic, and unfortunately, we arrived extremely late.
2.
We definitely want to go abroad this summer, ideally somewhere hot.
3.
It's incredibly easy. Even a child could do it.
4.
Mark gradually began to realize that Lily didn't love him anymore.
5.
I thought Roberto was Portuguese, but actually he's Brazilian.
6.
Apparently, Jack has been offered a promotion at work, but it will mean moving to New York.
7.
I absolutely love Italian food, especially pasta.
2.19 The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. Part 1.
$1.87. That was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bargaining with the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until her cheeks burned with embarrassment. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but sit on the shabby little couch and cry, so Della did it. Della lived with her husband in a furnished apartment at $8 a week. At the front door, there was an empty mailbox and a doorbell that no longer worked, and under the broken doorbell, there was a card with the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham came home and reached his apartment, he was called Jim and greatly loved by Mrs. James Dillingham, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della stopped crying and fixed her makeup. She stood by the window and looked out at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been more than she calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. She had spent many happy hours planning something nice for him, something fine and rare, something Jim deserved.
2.20 Part 2
Della looked at herself in the mirror. She pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now there were two possessions that Jim and Della were very proud of. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. It reached below her knee and made itself almost like a garment for her. As she looked in the mirror, she had an idea. She did her hair up again nervously and quickly. She hesitated for a minute and stood still while a tear or two fell on the worn red carpet. But then she put on her old brown jacket. She put on her old brown hat. With a brilliant sparkle in her eyes, she danced out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sofronie, hair goods of all kinds. Della ran up one flight of stairs and then stopped, panting.
Will you buy my hair?
Asked Della.
I buy hair,
said Madame.
Take your hat off, and let's take a look at it.
Down came the brown hair.
$20,
said Madame, lifting the hair with her hand.
Give it to me, quick,
said Della. The next 2 hours sped by quickly. She hurried through the stores looking for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned them all inside out. It was a platinum chain, simple and elegant in design. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both Jim and the chain. She paid $21 for the chain, and she hurried home with 87 cents.
2.21 Part 3
When Della reached home, she got out her curling irons and went to work repairing the damage to her hair. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with curls that made her look wonderfully like a naughty schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically.
If Jim doesn't kill me,
she said to herself,
before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87?
At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made, and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late.
Please, God, make him think I am still pretty,
Della whispered. The door opened, and Jim stepped in. He stopped inside the door. His eyes were fixed on Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read. and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her with a peculiar expression on his face.
Jim, darling,
she cried.
Don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you.
You've cut off your hair?
Asked Jim, as if he could not understand the fact.
Cut it off and sold it,
said Della.
Don't you like me just as well, anyhow? I'm me without my hair, aren't I?
Jim looked about the room curiously.
You say your hair is gone?
He said with an air almost of idiocy.
2.22 Part 4
Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table.
Don't make any mistake, Del,
he said.
About me. I don't think there's anything that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why I was upset at first.
Della tore at the string and paper. And then a scream of ecstatic joy.
Oh!
And then, alas, a quick change to hysterical tears and crying. For there lay the set of combs that Della had really wanted. Beautiful combs, just the color to wear in her beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had longed for them without the least hope that she would ever own them. And now they were hers, but the hair that the beautiful combs should have adorned was gone. But she hugged them to her chest, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say,
My hair grows so fast, Jim.
And then Della jumped up. Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him.
Isn't it dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it.
Instead of obeying, Jim sat down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled.
Del,
he said,
let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use right now. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now, suppose you put the chops on.
2.23 Interview with a children's book expert. Part 1
My name is Marion Pomerantz. I'm the manager of literary programs at a nonprofit in New York City called Learning Leaders. And I also have written 3 children's books.
What was your favorite book when you were a child?
My favorite book was If I Ran the Circus by Dr. Seuss. It was the first book in my home that was for children, and it was just so exciting to have it, to hold it, to read it, and I still have it.
What was it that you liked about Dr. Seuss?
What I love about Dr. Seuss is his use of language, the words, the made-up words, the way the words flow together and sound. It just brought me to a different place, and I love that.
Who read to you when you were a child? Your mom or dad or both?
My parents didn't speak English when I was growing up. They were English learners as I was growing up, and I kind of helped them with language. And I think I introduced books to the home, really. They became readers down the road.
You have a son, right? Did you read to him?
I have one son, and as a child, books were very important to me, and I think became important to him because of that. We read together every night. We read books like Stella Luna and Corduroy when he was young, and continued to read together, mostly fiction.
How has writing for children changed over time, maybe in the last 50 years?
I think books have changed and that authors are more cognizant of writing about real children and real issues. I grew up with stories like Nancy Drew, who lived in this fictional America where everyone was white and everyone had a mommy and a daddy, and now they write about more honest and true stories of what children's lives are really like.
And that's a good thing?
And that's a great thing.
2.24 Interview with a Children's Book Expert, Part 2.
Do you have any thoughts about getting teenagers to read more?
I do. I think teenagers would read if they were given more control over what they can read, if the choices were their own and they weren't told what they had to read, if they were told they were allowed to put a book down and start something else. And you can read anything. You can read the ads on the subway. You can read a magazine article. You can read the side of a cereal box. I mean, that's all reading.
Are there good authors or books in pop culture now whose material has encouraged teenagers to read?
I think that the series books that are really popular these days have helped teenagers want to read, like the Twilight series, the Harry Potter series. Kids like to go back. They like to become familiar with a character and the story, and I think those books have been successful because of that.
Going back to kids, what is the key to getting a very young person to start reading?
I think to get a child to start reading, the key is really to starting when they're young. Have books around your home. Have a library card. Share the books that you read with them. Talk about the books at dinner. Know what they're reading and talk about their books. Take a trip to a publishing house and see what goes into making a book. Meet an author if you can do that. Go to a bookstore and have someone who's written a book talk about a book. I think you have to just get the excitement of books across. If you're excited about books, they'll get excited about books.
What kind of books do you think young people enjoy reading?
The kind of books that children like to read are books maybe with a little subversion in them, books where maybe the adults are a little goofy and the kids solve the problems. Children want to relate. They want to feel they have a little bit of power. I think young children feel that way. Middle schoolers feel that way. And I think if you look carefully at books that kids really like, it's the one where youth dominates and kind of rules the world a little bit.
2.25 Interview with a Children's Book Expert, Part 3.
Do you prefer paper books or e-books, and why?
So I now prefer to read books on an e-reader, on my Kindle. I have tons of books in my house, and I haven't bought a book in 3 years. I only read on my Kindle and love it because to me, it's more intimate than a book. I've chosen the type of print, and so it's just me and the word. And the fact that I can carry 100 books with me at all times is a thrill.
Do you think e-readers are helpful for kids or teens who want to get into reading?
I think it would be wonderful for every child to have an e-reader. We're a technological society, and we're used to pushing buttons and getting things instantly. And I think it might be really helpful for children to have their own e-readers and start their own collection of books that way. And you can see every book you've read, and you can go back to it in 2 seconds, so why not?
Do you think social media has decreased or increased people's literacy?
So I think social media has had a positive effect on children. I think they're exposed to many, many more things. They can go online and get information on just about anything. I'm not afraid of the changes that any kind of social media brings to kids. They have to read, they have to write. Maybe they'll read a few less books, but maybe they'll write some amazing things about their adventures online. I think it's great.
Do you think despite all the technology, books will survive?
Yes, I think there's a great future for books. I think they'll be around for a long time. I think we all like to have our moments with a book, so sure.
Do you still read for pleasure? And if so, how much?
I read daily. I read on the subway. I read before I go to sleep. I read to relax. I'm usually reading 3 or 4 books at a time. Whatever pleases me, I go to. I'm always reading.
2.26 Interview with a children's book expert. Looking at language. 1.
What was it that you liked about Dr. Seuss?
What I love about Dr. Seuss is his use of language.
2.
The words, the made-up words, the way the words flow together and sound.
3.
You can read the side of a cereal box. I mean, that's all reading.
4.
And I think if you look carefully at books that kids really like, it's the one where youth dominates and kind of rules the world a little bit.
5.
Do you think social media has decreased or increased people's literacy?
So I think social media has had a positive effect on children.
2.27 On the street. Jill.
What was your favorite book when you were a child?
I think my favorite book when I was a child probably is Where the Wild Things Are.
Why did you like it so much?
I think I liked it because of the fantasy aspects, and it was just a creative book, and I think a lot of kids like it for that reason. So.
Did you see the movie?
No, I did not see the movie, unfortunately. I should. So.
Was there a character in a children's book that you identified with?
Well, I used to read a book series called Trixie Belden, and Trixie Belden was a sort of a teenage or young teen mystery person, and she was very curious and very liked to solve mysteries, and I always fashioned that, I would like to do that as well.
Sean.
What was your favorite book when you were a child?
Probably The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Why did you like it so much?
I remember we had a teacher at school who read it aloud to us, and when I was probably 6 or 7, when I was too young to read it myself. And I remember getting the book and then sitting down by myself and reading it. And I think it was the first time I realised how much you could get out of a book, I think.
Was there a character in a children's book that you identified with?
I can't think of any specific characters. I think I was quite a scruffy child. I always had dirty knees and torn clothes and things like that. So whenever there was a boy who got into lots of trouble, I usually thought that's a little bit like me. But I can't think of one particular one.
Rachel.
What was your favorite book when you were a child?
I think Coraline by Neil Gaiman was my favorite.
Why did you like it so much?
I liked the writing style. A lot of books just sort of have a wall of text that's hard to absorb, but I thought it was easier to read.
Was there a character in a children's book that you identified with?
I identified with Coraline because I tend to be curious about stuff, and also because in a lot of the sorts of books that I like, unfortunately, the protagonists are usually male.
2.28 Colloquial English phrases. 1.
Trixie Belden was a sort of a teenage or young teen mystery person.
2.
I remember we had a teacher at school who read it aloud to us.
3.
I realised how much you could get out of a book, I think.
4.
So whenever there was a boy who got into lots of trouble.
5.
I identified with Coraline because I tend to be curious about stuff.
2.29
The decorators will have finished painting by Tuesday, so we can move back into the apartment then.
The soccer team says that they'll have built the new stadium in 6 months.
Laura won't have arrived before dinner, so I'll leave some food on the stove for her.
When will they have learned enough English to be able to communicate fluently?
2.30.
Don't call between 7 and 8 because we'll be having dinner then.
Good luck on your test tomorrow. I'll be thinking of you.
This time tomorrow, I'll be sitting on the beach watching the sunset.
Come at 7 because we won't be starting dinner until 8.
Will you be waiting for me when I get off the train?
I'll be going to the supermarket later. Do you want anything?
2.31. What's the weather like? A. 1.
It's cool.
2.
It's chilly.
3.
It's freezing.
4.
It's below 0.
5.
It's mild.
6.
It's warm.
7.
It's boiling.
8.
It's humid.
9.
It's damp.
10.
It's drizzling.
11.
There are showers.
12.
It's pouring.
13.
There's a breeze.
B.
When the weather's foggy or misty, or there is smog, it's difficult to see.
Mist isn't usually very thick and often occurs in the mountains or near the ocean.
Fog is thicker and can be found in towns and in the country.
Smog is caused by pollution and usually occurs in big cities.
2.32. Extreme weather. 1.
Heat wave.
2.
Drought.
3.
Hail.
4.
Lightning.
5.
Thunder.
6.
Blizzard.
7.
Flood.
8.
Hurricane.
9.
Monsoon.
2.33. Adjectives to describe weather.
In the western part of New York, it will be very cold, with strong winds and heavy rain. There will also be thick fog in the hills and valleys, though it should clear by midday. Driving will be dangerous because the roads will be icy. However, the Hudson Valley and the tri-state area will have clear skies, and it will be bright and sunny, though the temperature will still be low. Over the next few days, the weather will be changeable, with some showers but occasional sunny periods. It should become more settled over the weekend.
2.34. 1.
Blow. Snow. Showers. Below.
2.
Weather. Sweat. Heavy. Heat.
3.
Drizzle. Blizzard. Chilly. Mild.
4.
Hard. Warm. Dark. Garden.
5.
Flood. Moon. Soon. Loose.
6.
Fought. Ought. Drought. Brought.
7.
thunder, sunny, summer, humid.
8. Scorching, world, tornado, storm.
2.35. 1.
It'll be below zero tomorrow with some snow showers.
2.
He was sweating heavily because of the heat.
3.
It's windy, chilly, and starting to drizzle.
4.
The river is going to flood soon.
5.
Summer days are usually sunny and humid.
2.36. 1.
It was just at the end of the summer in 2013, yeah, and I was a college student at the University of Colorado in Boulder. It had been really dry that summer, hardly any rain at all, and it was incredibly hot. Then toward the end of September, the rain came, and it rained almost an entire week. At first, everyone was so relieved because the rain brought cooler temperatures and made the grass green, but then it just kept raining and raining. Streams and creeks started flooding and roared out of the mountains, and it was really scary. The stream that goes through my college campus flooded several dorm buildings, and kids had to find safe places to stay. Some rooms had 3 to 4 feet of water in them. I was okay because I lived on a high floor in my dorm. Even though there was a lot of damage to the campus and to a lot of the town surrounding Boulder, there was a bright side. Kids on the athletic team served lunch to flood victims in the community. Other students donated their clothes, shoes, and books to kids who had lost their belongings in flooded dorm rooms. So, even though the flooding was extremely severe, it really made me realize that we have a supportive college community here.
2.
This was in the summer of 2003, and there was a pretty intense heat wave in New York City. I remember it really well because I just started working as an office assistant in a civil engineering firm, and I'd only been at my new job for a few weeks. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, on August 14th, the electricity went out all across New York City. The massive blackout, caused in part by everyone using their air conditioners, affected 7 states in the eastern U.S. along with parts of Canada. My boss told me to go home, so I did. First, I had to walk down 17 flights of stairs because the elevators didn't work. Then I had to walk nearly 4 miles from Manhattan to Brooklyn in the heat because the subways didn't work. Thank goodness I could walk over the Brooklyn Bridge to get back to Brooklyn. When I finally got home around 8 in the evening, I was absolutely surprised and happy to see all my apartment building neighbors outside cooking on grills and getting to know one another. It was too hot to stay inside, so I enjoyed the evening sitting outside on the sidewalk with my neighbors. It's been over 10 years since that blackout, and I have very fond memories of that day. But I don't really want to go through that experience again anytime soon.
3.
On October 29, 2011, I was visiting friends in upstate New York when it started snowing. It's pretty unusual for snow to fall in New York during late October, but I was safe with my friends, so I didn't mind. The next day, it was time for me to drive home. It had only snowed about 3 inches in Albany, and the roads there were completely clear, so I thought my 2-hour trip home would be uneventful. However, as I started driving south, I noticed the snow was getting deeper. Trees were bent over and many had fallen. Driving was rather stressful because the roads were slippery and dangerous. When I finally got home, almost 5 hours later, there was nearly 2 feet of snow on the ground, and I couldn't drive up my driveway, which only added to my stress. I parked on the street and trudged up to my house, only to discover there was no electricity. I ended up booking a room in a local hotel for a week until work crews reconnected the electrical wires. That storm caused billions of dollars of damage across the Northeast. Over 3 million people were without electricity, some for up to 3 weeks. and cities across the Northeast reported record snowfall totals. In addition, many communities had to cancel or postpone Halloween celebrations. It wasn't safe for the children to walk in the snow. Luckily for me, no trees had fallen on my house during the storm, but I was mad that it took me several days to shovel my driveway.
2.38. 1.
Yes, I think I am. Or anyway, more than I used to be. I think my attitude to risk has changed as I've gotten older. For example, I'm more open to risking a change in appearance because I think I'm less self-conscious now. I often change hairstyles and colour, but when I was younger, I had the same hairstyle for years and years. I also think I would take more risks travelling now because I'm more self-confident, so I'm pretty sure I could cope with any problems.
2.
Yes, I'm definitely a risk taker. I take risks to do things that I enjoy, like skiing or riding a bike in New York City, which is pretty dangerous. In fact, I think the element of risk probably makes them even more enjoyable. The only time I wouldn't take a risk would be if I couldn't see that I was going to get any pleasure from it. I wouldn't do something risky just for the sake of it.
3.
I'm the kind of person who likes to know exactly what I'm doing and when I'm doing it, so there's not much room for risk in my life. For me, risk means not being completely in control, and that can make me feel really nervous. For example, if I'm meeting a friend for dinner, I always make sure we have a table booked somewhere nice. I wouldn't risk just turning up and hoping that there was a table. And I never buy clothes online because I don't want to run the risk of them being the wrong size and having to send them back.
4.
I'm definitely not a risk taker. I might like to think that I am because it seems exciting, but I'm not. I live in a suburb of Boston, and I'd never walk home on my own in the evening when it's dark because that just seems like an unnecessary risk to take. And I'd never get into a taxi on my own at night. But on the other hand, I would love to do something like bungee jumping or paragliding, which other people would probably think is risky.
5.
I don't see myself as a risk taker. I've done a lot of mountain climbing, and everyone assumes because of this that I'm attracted to risk, but it isn't really true. In fact, when you're climbing high mountains, you're always trying to minimize the risk. The biggest risk I've ever taken in my life was a professional one. After 20 years in the same job, I left and set up my own company. And that's given me a lot more sleepless nights than climbing in the Andes or the Himalayas.
6.
I am happy to take risks. I love driving fast. In fact, I bought myself a sports car when I had some money, and I got quite a few speeding tickets, though probably not as many as I deserved. I also take risks with money, like lending to people who probably won't pay me back, or spending all I have on something a little bit unnecessary. Last year, I went on a balloon ride, and I was amazed that so many people said, "Ooh, I wouldn't do that." I loved it, and I'd happily do it again. It was fantastic.
2.39.
If you want to be in shape, you need to exercise every day.
If people are wearing headphones while walking, they often don't notice other people.
If you haven't been to New York, you haven't lived.
2.40.
If the photos are good, I'll send them to you.
If you're not going to Jason's party, I'm not going to go either.
If I haven't come back by 9 o'clock, start dinner without me.
I'll have it finished in an hour if you don't disturb me.
2.41.
I'll be ready as soon as I've had a cup of coffee.
Text me when your train's coming into the station.
I'm not going to buy the new model until the price has gone down a little.
I'm not going to work overtime this weekend unless I get paid for it.
Take your umbrella in case it's raining when you leave work.
2.42 Dialogue 1 1.
I'll tell you as soon as I know my plans.
2.
If 6 of us go, it won't be too expensive.
3.
We'll have to book soon if we want to get something nice.
Dialogue 2 4.
I'll be waiting by the ticket office when you get there.
5.
What will you do if I'm late?
6.
Well, give me my ticket in case I get there at the last minute.
2.43
If we rent a house in the mountains, will you come skiing with us?
I'll tell you as soon as I know my plans. How much do you think it'll cost?
If 6 of us go, it won't be too expensive.
Well, I'll have to check my dates first.
Okay, but we'll have to book soon if we want to get something nice.
How will I find you at the theater?
I'll be waiting by the ticket office when you get there.
What will you do if I'm late? I don't finish work until 7 o'clock.
I'll wait for you until 7:20, and then I'll go to my seat.
Well, give me my ticket in case I get there at the last minute.
2.44
For most of us, the riskiest thing we ever do is to get into a car and drive. And because this is something that we do almost every day of our lives, we need to take the risks involved in driving very seriously. Sandra, you're an expert on road safety. How dangerous is driving compared to other ways of getting around?
Driving gets a lot of bad publicity. Statistics show that mile for mile, it's riskier to be a pedestrian or a jogger than to drive a car or ride a motorcycle.
But car accidents do happen. What's the main reason?
Many fatal accidents occur because someone has broken the law. The most frequent cause of fatal accidents in the U.S. is distracted driving. When a driver focuses his attention on a cell phone or to eat something, and the second most frequent is driving too fast. And the third major cause of fatal accidents is drunk driving.
Tell us about some of the other factors that can increase our chances of having an accident.
Well, the time of day we're on the road is a very significant factor.
Oh.
Generally speaking, driving at night, for example, is 4 times as dangerous as during the day. This is mainly because visibility is so much worse when it's dark. By day, a driver's visibility is roughly 500 yards. But at night, driving with headlights, it can be as little as 120 yards.
Are there any times of day or night that are particularly risky?
Research shows that you're most likely to have an accident between 5 and 7 p.m. during the week. That's to say, during the evening rush hour. And especially in the winter when it's dark. And the day of the week when you're most likely to have an accident is Saturday. In the U.S., more accidents happen on a Saturday than at any other day.
Why do you think that is?
It's probably because the weekend is when the highest number of people are driving. Therefore, the more people driving on the roads increases the chances of having an accident.
Which brings us to where accidents happen.
Just over 50% of accidents happen within 5 miles of where we live. Statistically, the most common kind of accident is crashing into a parked car near our home. Research shows that drivers concentrate less well when they're driving on familiar roads. Fortunately, most of these accidents are not fatal.
So, what about fatal accidents? Where do these tend to happen?
As far as fatal accidents are concerned, the riskiest kind of road to drive on is a rural road. More fatal car crashes in the U.S. happen on country roads than on city streets. In fact, 4,000 more car accidents happen on a country road than on an urban road.
And why is that?
drivers often think that it's okay to break the speed limit on these roads because there's less traffic, and consequently, they take more risks.
Mm-hmm. And the safest kind of road to drive on?
A freeway is by far the safest kind of road.
People, usually men, say that women have more accidents than men. Is that true?
Well, it is true that mile for mile, women have more minor accidents than men. But a man is twice as likely to be killed in a car accident as a woman.
So, men really are more dangerous drivers then?
Women, by nature, are usually much more careful and cautious drivers than men. In general, men take far more unnecessary risks when they're driving than women.
The age of a driver must be an important factor, too.
Yes. In fact, it's probably the most important factor. A driver aged between 17 and 24 has double the risk of having an accident than an older driver. The reasons for this are obvious. This is the age when drivers have very limited experience with driving, but it's also when they're most likely to drive too fast and take unnecessary risks, particularly if there are other young people in the car.
Which is why a lot of people would like to see the age limit for having a driver's license raised to 21.
I think it would be a very good idea.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for coming into the studio today, Sandra. And to all you drivers out there who are listening, drive safely.
2.45. A short movie on the weatherman.
New York is known for sometimes having extreme weather. So where do New Yorkers go for the most up-to-date weather forecasts? They watch their favorite TV weatherman, Mr. G.
Hi, I'm Mr. G. I'm the meteorologist at Channel 11 here in New York, WPIX-TV, and also CBS Radio in New York. So I'm in charge of telling a story, building a drama of cold temperatures, wind chill factors, snow on the ground for 35 days. For the 19th time this season, flakes are in the air. It's been snow to sleet, it's been sleet to snow, it's been snow to sleet to rain. It's been raining on Long Island, sleeting in the city, snowing in the suburbs. I want to build up this story to announce what people don't want to hear, another possible snowstorm. The polar vortex is back. More on this later on. Does a cold winter mean a warm summer? No, it's folklore.
So how do New Yorkers handle all this bad weather news?
Certain kind of weather affects people. I mean, it's been a winter where snow's been on the ground a long time. That affects people. I think people have been indoors a lot. But New Yorkers are a tough group. I think people want to connect. And so weather's a great way to connect. Whether you're single and you want to meet somebody, talk about the weather. Whether you want to complain, talk about the weather.
And even though the weather may not be getting any better, the technology we use to predict it is.
When I first started the business, it was 72-hour forecast. As the science progressed, now everybody sees a 7-day forecast. Well, what you're going to see in 2 years is a 10-day forecast. And when my daughter grows up, it will be a 30-day forecast.
So what makes for a great TV weatherman?
Connecting is a big part of the job. The people know the weather. They get it on the computer. They get it on the app. 32% of the audience between 10 and 11 o'clock in New York City watches the news, which means to me that they still want to get it from somebody they trust. So they watch Mr. G for a reason. I still haven't found out that reason, but I know I work hard to tell a good story every night.
.2 Adjectives. 1. J.
I'm very offended.
2. F.
I feel a little homesick.
3. E.
I'm a little disappointed.
4. G.
I'm very lonely.
5. I.
I'm incredibly proud.
6. H.
I'm really nervous.
7. C.
I'm very grateful.
8. A.
I'm shocked.
9. D.
I'm so relieved.
10. B.
I feel a little guilty.
3.3. Strong adjectives. 1.
Stunned.
2.
Devastated.
3.
Delighted.
4.
Thrilled.
5.
Astonished.
6.
Desperate.
7.
Overwhelmed.
8.
Bewildered.
9.
Horrified.
3.4. Informal or slang words and expressions. 1. B.
I was scared stiff when I heard the bedroom door opening.
2. A.
You look a little down. What's the problem?
3. D.
I'm absolutely worn out. I want to relax and put my feet up.
4. F.
When I saw her, I couldn't believe my eyes. She looked 10 years younger.
5. E.
I'm sick and tired of hearing you complain about your job.
6. C.
He finally passed his driver's test. He's jumping for joy.
3.5. 1.
Hi, Sue. What's the matter?
I was just robbed. Please come quickly. I'm desperate.
2.
You weren't offended by what I said, were you?
Yes, actually I was.
3.
What did you think of the movie?
To be honest, I was a little disappointed.
4.
What don't you understand in the report?
I'm just completely bewildered by so many facts and figures.
5.
Were you surprised to hear that the boss is leaving?
I was astonished. I really wasn't expecting it.
6.
So, can you come to dinner next week?
Yes, we'd be delighted to.
7.
How did your parents react when you told them you and Susan had separated?
They were devastated.
8.
How did you feel when you heard the news?
I was absolutely horrified. It was such an awful accident.
9.
So do you like the watch?
I love it. I'm completely overwhelmed. I don't know what to say.
3.6.
Yossi and Kevin soon realized that going by river was a big mistake. The river got faster and faster, and soon they were in rapids. The raft was swept down the river at an incredible speed until it hit a rock. Both men were thrown into the water. Kevin was a strong swimmer, and he managed to swim to land, but Yossi was swept away by the rapids.
Yossi! Help! Help! Kevin! Yossi!
But Yossi didn't drown. He was carried several miles downriver by the rapids, but he eventually managed to swim to the riverbank. He was totally exhausted. By an incredible piece of luck, he found their backpack floating in the river. The backpack contained a little food, insect repellent, a lighter, and most important of all, the map. But the two friends were now separated by a canyon and 3 or 4 miles of jungle.
(3.7)
Kevin was feeling desperate. He didn't know if Yossi was alive or dead, but he started walking downriver to look for him. He felt responsible for what had happened to his friend because he had persuaded him to go with him on the river.
Yossi! Yossi!
Yossi, however, was feeling very optimistic. He was sure that Kevin would look for him, so he started walking upriver calling his friend's name.
Kevin! Kevin!
But nobody answered. At night, Yossi tried to sleep, but he felt terrified. The jungle was full of noises. Suddenly, he woke up because he heard a branch breaking. He turned on his flashlight. There was a jaguar staring at him. Yossi was trembling with fear. But then he remembered something he had once seen in a movie. He used the cigarette lighter to set fire to the insect repellent spray, and he managed to scare the jaguar away.
(3.8)
After 5 days alone, Yossi was exhausted and starving. Suddenly, as he was walking, he saw a footprint on the trail. It was a hiking boot. It had to be Kevin's footprint.
Kevin!
He followed the trail until he discovered another footprint, and then another. But suddenly he realized that the footprints weren't Kevin's footprints. They were his own. He had been walking around in a circle. At that moment, Yossi realized that he would never find Kevin. In fact, he felt sure that Kevin must be dead. He felt totally depressed and at the point of giving up.
(3.9)
But Kevin wasn't dead. He was still looking for Yossi. But after nearly a week, he was also weak and exhausted from lack of food and lack of sleep. He decided that it was time to forget Yossi and try to save himself. He had just enough strength left to hold onto a log and let himself float down the river. Kevin was incredibly lucky. He was rescued by 2 Bolivian hunters who were traveling downriver in a canoe. The men only hunted in that part of the rainforest once a year, so if they had passed by a short time earlier or later, they wouldn't have seen Kevin. They took him back to the town of San Jose, where he spent 2 days recovering.
3.10
As soon as Kevin felt well enough, he went to a Bolivian army base and asked them to look for Yossi.
Mi amigo se pierde en la selva. ¿Debes buscarlo?
The army officer he spoke to was sure that Yossi must be dead. But in the end, Kevin persuaded them to take him up in a plane and fly over the part of the rainforest where Yossi might be. But the plane had to fly too high over the rainforest, and the forest was too dense. They couldn't see anything at all. It was a hopeless search. Kevin felt terribly guilty. He was convinced that it was all his fault that Yossi was going to die in the jungle. Kevin's last hope was to pay a local man with a boat to take him up the river to look for his friend.
3.11.
By now, Yossi had been on his own in the jungle for nearly 3 weeks. He hadn't eaten for days. He was starving, exhausted, and slowly losing his mind. It was evening. He lay down by the side of the river, ready for another night alone in the jungle. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a bee buzzing in his ear. He thought a bee had gotten inside his mosquito net. But when he opened his eyes, he saw that the buzzing noise wasn't a bee. It was a boat. Yossi was too weak to shout. "Help!" But Kevin had already seen him.
Yossi! Yossi! Yossi!
It was a 1 in a million chance that Kevin would find his friend. But he did. Yossi was saved. When Yossi had recovered, he and Kevin flew to the city of La Paz and they went directly to the hotel where they had agreed to meet Marcus and Carl. But Marcus and Carl were not at the hotel. The two men had never arrived back in the town of Apollo. The Bolivian army organized a search of the rainforest, but Marcus and Carl were never seen again.
(3.12) 1.
If there was a fire in this hotel, it would be very difficult to escape.
I wouldn't have a car if I didn't live in the suburbs.
2.
If you weren't making so much noise, I could concentrate better.
3.
If I were you, I'd make Jimmy wear a helmet when he's riding a bike.
3.13. 1.
If you had come to class more often, you would have done better on the exams.
I wouldn't have been late if I hadn't overslept.
2.
He would have died if he hadn't been wearing a helmet.
If the jacket had been a little cheaper, I might have bought it.
3.14. 1.
If you came to class more often, you would probably pass the exam.
2.
If you had come to class more often, you would probably have passed the exam.
3.15.
I wish bike riders wouldn't ride on the sidewalk.
I wish you'd spend a little more time with the children.
I wish the bus would come. I'm freezing.
I wish you wouldn't leave your shoes there. I almost fell over them.
3.16. 1.
It really infuriates me when people drive close behind me.
2.
I get very frustrated when something goes wrong with my internet connection and I don't know how to fix it.
3.
It's so embarrassing when I can't remember someone's name, but they can remember mine.
4.
I used to love shopping during a big sale, but now I find it exhausting. After an hour, I just want to go home.
5.
I'm often disappointed with my birthday presents. My expectations are obviously too high.
6.
It amazes me that some people still don't buy things like books and music online.
7.
I find speaking in public absolutely terrifying. I hate doing it.
8.
I have often been inspired by reading about how some successful people have overcome difficulties.
9.
I never find instructions for electronic devices helpful. In fact, usually they just confuse me.
10.
When I travel, I'm always thrilled if I manage to communicate something in a foreign language.
3.17.
The top 5 regrets were, in reverse order, number 5, having started smoking, number 4, not having saved enough money, number 3, not having exercised more or eaten more healthily, number 2, not keeping in touch with friends, and the number 1 regret was not having traveled more and seen more of the world.
3.18. 1.
I wish I was 10 years younger.
I wish I could understand what they're saying.
2.
I wish I hadn't bought those shoes.
I wish you'd told me the truth.
3.19. 1.
I wish I hadn't eaten 2 pieces of cake.
2.
I wish I'd gone to college.
3.
I wish it wasn't my turn to cook tonight.
4.
I wish I knew where we were.
5.
I wish we didn't have to go to your parents for dinner.
6.
I wish I'd bought those shoes I saw on sale.
3.20. 1.
I wish I hadn't eaten 2 pieces of cake.
Well, it's not my fault. You have no self-control.
2.
I wish I'd gone to college.
Well, it isn't too late. You're only 22.
3.
I wish it wasn't my turn to cook tonight.
Sorry, but it is, and I'm getting hungry.
4.
I wish I knew where we were.
Well, don't ask me. I've never been here before.
5.
I wish we didn't have to go to your parents for dinner.
Do you want me to call and make an excuse?
6.
I wish I'd bought those shoes I saw on sale.
Why don't you go back to the store and see if they still have them?
3.21. 1.
The only thing I really regret is not having had the courage to talk to a girl I met at a party last summer. I really liked her. She was very attractive. But I just wasn't brave enough to start a conversation. I wish I'd tried. I'm absolutely positive we would have gotten along well. Now it's too late. She's engaged to another guy.
2. At the risk of sounding really negative, the one thing I really regret in my life is getting married. My sister said to me in the car on the way to the registry office, "Someone has to say to you that you really don't have to do this, you know." And, I ignored her because I thought, what do you know? You're still single. But, in fact, the next day when I woke up, I realized it was a terrible mistake, and I spent the next 15 years trying to get out of it. So, and I would never do it again, so that's probably my biggest regret.
3.
I really wish I'd been able to know my grandmother better. She died when I was 12, and since then I discovered that she must have been a really fascinating person. And there are so many things I would love to have been able to talk to her about. She was Polish, but she was in Russia, in St. Petersburg during the Russian Revolution, and she knew all kinds of interesting people at the time. Painters, writers, people like that. I was only a child, so I never asked her much about her own life. Now I'm discovering all about her through reading her old letters and papers. But I wish she'd lived longer so that I could have talked to her about those times face to face.
4.
When I was 15, I had a weekend job in a supermarket, stocking shelves and that kind of thing. My friend also worked there, and he persuaded me one day to help him steal a carton of cigarettes, 200 cigarettes from the stockroom. It was a crazy idea and totally out of character for me to do something like that. I'd always been very honest until then. Anyway, the store manager found where we'd hidden the cigarettes, and he called the police. So when we came to work that evening, The police were waiting for us. Although we got off with just a warning, we were only kids. The police came to my house and talked to my mom. I felt so awful. But in the long run, it was probably a good thing, because it meant that I never, ever thought about stealing something again.
5.
When I was 16, I got the chance to change schools and go to a better school to do my last 2 years. My parents were really eager for me to change schools because they thought I'd probably get better scores on the college aptitude test and have a better chance of going to college. But I was totally against the idea because I didn't want to leave all my friends behind, and I didn't know anyone at the other school. So in the end, I managed to convince them and I stayed at my old school. I did okay on the test, but not super well. Now I regret not listening to my parents because I think it would have been better for my future career. But at the time, I just couldn't see it.
3.23 Interview with a film director, Part 1.
What were you hoping to do by making the film Trashed?
Well, I think the role of the film for me was to raise awareness on the topic and get it into the press so that people could start having a meaningful conversation about waste, which is not a particularly attractive subject, let's say.
How many countries did you film in?
We ended up actually filming in 11 countries, but the stories that I've chosen are universal, and obviously I spoke to people in communities in more countries than we actually filmed in, but the stories are certainly not isolated. They're repeated around the world, sadly, wherever you kind of want to pick, actually.
How did you persuade Jeremy Irons to get involved in the film?
I had worked with Jeremy some years ago on a different film, and I was generally aware that he doesn't like waste either. He will, wear his jumpers until they're worn out. He'll keep his cars until they're falling apart. He'll repair everything. So he's always seen, the value in reusing things. It's just something natural to him as well. So he just felt like a natural first approach, and so I sent him the treatment, and amazingly, he loved it.
It's of wood. But in the 50 years since then, things have changed. The treasure I used to find in the sand has been replaced by trash.
How did you get Vangelis to write the soundtrack?
Well, Jeremy and Vangelis have been friends for years, so Jeremy sent him the rough cut of the film, and Vangelis absolutely loved it. He is also a committed environmentalist, so he's always been aware. He was aware because he'd worked with Cousteau, sort of various people, he was aware of issues for the seas and so on. But generally, again, he was very shocked by the film and really wanted to get involved, so.
What research did you do before you started making the film?
I spent about a year talking to communities, talking to experts, obviously reading an awful lot, and just ingesting it all because obviously, again, it's such an enormous topic to take on.
3.24 Interview with a film director, Part 2.
Rubbish isn't very attractive visually. Was that a problem for you as a filmmaker?
Yes and no. Strangely enough, obviously I had a wonderful DOP, director of photography, so he can pretty much make anything look beautiful, I think. But I wanted to choose, as I've said earlier, I did a lot of research, and so sadly these things were repeatable and in every country around the world. So I wanted to choose beautiful places wherever possible that have been ruined, unfortunately, by man-made rubbish. So the ancient port of Saida in Lebanon, The fact that, you know, you've got this huge mountain of waste, which was formerly a flat, sandy beach.
What was a sandy beach has been replaced by a trash mountain. Well over 40 meters in height.
Documentaries about how we're destroying the planet can be very depressing. Was that also a challenge for you?
A huge challenge, yes. I would have preferred to make a much more cheerful documentary than I think Trash is. I think it has got hope. I think because we were very much aware that we wanted to offer solutions at the end of it. But you are, the subject is not a cheerful subject. I could have gone further, I think, with it, but I didn't want to because actually, you know, you could sort of end up feeling like you just want to go and shoot yourself, which is not what I wanted. I wanted to feel that, you know, people feel that they can make a difference to this topic.
In the film, you focus on air pollution, land pollution, and water pollution. Which do you think is the most worrying?
If I had to pick one, which I would be reluctant to do, it would be water, without a doubt. I think that what has happened to all of the oceans and beaches actually as well in the world in the last 30 years is astonishing in the scale and the speed. You know, there are certain places in the world that, you know, you have to dig down on a beach over a foot before you will find sand that doesn't have plastic in it. Unfortunately, what's happened with the way that soft plastic degrades in water is that the pieces become so fragmented that they're the same size as the zooplankton, which obviously is in the food chain.
3.25 Interview with a film director, Part 3.
Who do you think is mostly to blame for the problems we have with waste?
I tried very hard, actually, not to blame one person or things in the film, actually, quite deliberately, because I think, in a way, it lets us off the hook. And it also, I think we all need to work on the problem together because it's too complicated to blame one person or one thing or one act or... you know, I think it's multifaceted, unfortunately.
As well as using
Your film finishes on an optimistic note, with the example of San Francisco's zero waste policy. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I actually, in the film, ended up using San Francisco as the example because I wanted to show that zero waste could be achieved on a big scale.
Tell me about...
When you go and stay in San Francisco in your hotel room, you'll have 4 different bins and you'll have signs on the wall of what goes into each bin. So it's very, very easy to recycle, and I think that's a huge part of what we should be doing.
Has the film changed your own habits regarding waste?
I don't think the film has particularly changed my own habits dramatically because I've always been thrifty by nature because I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time with my grandparents when I was growing up. And the post-war sort of philosophy of never wasting anything, it just, you know, it was instilled in me. I ride the same bicycle that I've had since I was 15 years old, and I've, over the years, obviously had it repaired and repaired. But I take tremendous pride in the fact that I've always ridden the same bike, and you know, I have lovely memories of it. So, and with it, so I think we need a sort of slight change of mindset to make things cool. The longer you have them, in a way, than actually this perpetual thing of buying new things for the sake of it.
3.26 Interview with a film director. Looking at language. 1.
We ended up actually filming in 11 countries.
2.
But the stories that I've chosen are universal, and obviously I spoke to people in communities in more countries than we actually filmed in.
3,
And so I sent him the treatment, and amazingly, he loved it.
4,
But generally, again, he was very shocked by the film and really wanted to get involved.
5,
Yes and no. Strangely enough, obviously, I had a wonderful DOP, director of photography, so he can pretty much make anything look beautiful.
6,
I did a lot of research, and so sadly these things were repeatable and in every country around the world.
7,
Unfortunately, what's happened with the way that soft plastic degrades in water is that the pieces become so fragmented.
3.27. On the street. Sally.
How much recycling do people in your country do?
I don't think we do enough. I think we could do a little bit more. I'm not wonderful myself, but we try and do a little bit of recycling.
How responsible are you personally?
Well, we'd probably do about 30% we recycle.
What do you think the government or individuals could do to make people recycle more?
Well, they could give you all these boxes and bins and things at home to help you recycle. The Germans seem to do it quite well.
Joe.
How much recycling do people in your country do?
I think people are quite good at recycling. I think now that the waste companies come and collect recycling from the houses, people haven't really got an excuse not to recycle anymore.
How responsible are you personally?
I recycle as much as I can.
What do you think the government or individuals could do to make people recycle more?
Well, maybe they could offer a financial incentive for recycling, or maybe for producing less rubbish that can't be recycled.
Jill.
How much recycling do people in your country do?
I think that recycling is getting better in this country. I think we still have a long ways to go. I think it's still done largely in pockets and not necessarily nationwide as much as it could be.
How responsible are you personally?
Actually, in the town where I live, we have a very strong recycling program, and so I participate in filling it up with cans and bottles and newspapers and all kinds of stuff, and they come and get it every other week, so easy to do. Mm-hmm.
What do you think the government or individuals could do to make people recycle more?
Oh, well, incentives always work. Besides above and beyond monetary incentives, just incentives to, promote benefits to the environment.
Pranjal.
How much recycling do people in your country do?
I don't think people in the U.S. recycle enough. I think we should recycle more, and I'm even guilty of not recycling enough, but I don't think we recycle enough.
How responsible are you personally?
Personally, I'm not really that responsible in cycling. I'll be honest, I don't really recycle that often, but if I do get the opportunity to recycle, I will.
What do you think the government or individuals could do to make people recycle more?
Well, I think it's important for individuals to realize that even the smallest difference makes a big difference, and so if everyone can just get in that mindset that the smallest change they can make in their lives makes a big difference, I think that will in fact make a big difference.
.28. Colloquial English phrases. 1,
Well, maybe they could offer a financial incentive for recycling.
2,
I think we still have a long ways to go.
3,
Besides above and beyond monetary incentives, just incentives to, promote benefits to the environment.
4,
Filling it up with cans and bottles and newspapers and all kinds of stuff.
5,
So if everyone can just get in that mindset that the smallest change they can make in their lives makes a big difference.
3.29. 1. Two. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8.
Stop. Okay, we're going to take it again from bar 69. Okay.
9. 10. 11. 3.30. 1.
A cello.
2.
drums,
3.
A soprano.
4.
a bass guitar,
5.
An orchestra.
6.
a saxophone,
7.
A flute.
8.
Stop. Okay, we're going to take it again from bar 69.
a conductor,
9.
A choir.
10.
A keyboard.
11.
A violin.
3.31. From Italian.
Cello.
Concerto.
Mezzo-soprano.
From Greek.
Orchestra.
Choir.
Chorus.
Microphone.
Rhythm.
Symphony.
From French.
Ballet.
Encore.
Genre.
3.32. From Italian.
Barista. Cappuccino. Graffiti. Macchiato. Paparazzi. Villa.
From Greek.
Architecture. Hypochondriac. Philosophy. Photograph. Psychic. Psychologist.
From French.
Bouquet. Chauffeur. Chef. Chic. Croissant. Fiancé.